Welcome back, students, for your literature class. Today we'll be doing the next poem, that is Daffodils. It is written by William Wordsworth. You all have studied maybe this or any other poem of William Wordsworth during your middle school. Before we start with the poem, let me introduce you to the poet. English literature is not complete without reading of William Wordsworth. He is considered as one of the greatest romantic poets. He's been rightly considered as a leader of new era, a new movement in English poetry, for he had used a common language. He has used the everyday language, common people, and the nature in his poetry. Wordsworth was a great lover of nature, and this poem was inspired by his real life experience. He lived an unsettled life for some years, and he came to limelight with his lyrical ballads. The content and style of his writing was quite unique and even shocking to the readers of poetry. It marked the beginning of Romanticism in poetry. He had great affinity with nature and common man. He found an invisible bonding between man, nature, and God. And among his best poems are Daffodils, Solitary Reaper, Lucy Poem, The Prelude. In this poem, this is a real life experience. Once when he was walking with his sister, he came upon a sight of a belt of daffodils beside a lake, with the wind blowing over the flowers. The sight of this vast expanse of yellow flowers inspired Wordsworth to write this remarkable poem. He goes on to tell the reader that long after he had this experience, the mere memory of the sight would lift up his spirit when he felt dejected or depressed. Daffodils is considered Wordsworth's most famous work. It shows vividly his love of nature. It underlines the idea that beautiful objects of nature like daffodils, flowers that bloom earliest in spring in England, fill our minds with pleasure, and even the memory of such objects delight us. The poet tells us how he once saw a large number of golden-colored, beautiful daffodils growing beside a lake, and in their company he felt happy and was lost in their beauty. He continued to gaze at the beautiful sight. Afterwards, whenever he was lonely or sad, the memory of these beautiful flowers filled him with great happiness. His heart began to dance with the dancing daffodils. Before we start the poem, let me introduce you to the poem. Daffodils is the outcome of actual visualization rather than imagery. It depicts the sight of the poet actually enjoyed in the company of his sister Dorothy while they were in the woods beyond Gobarrow Park. In the beginning, the poet describes himself as a cloud that floats over the hills. He seems to recall one of his idle wanderings, and suddenly his eyes fell upon a large belt of golden daffodils blooming along the bank of a lake. To the poet, the daffodils looked as beautiful and numerous as the twinkling stars. The dance of the daffodils surpassed that of the waves in the lake in the gentle breeze. A poet could not but be happy in the company of daffodils. Whenever now the poet is sad or lonely, depressed, dejected, the memory of daffodils fills his mind with pleasure. It takes its origin from the emotions recollected in tranquility. We start with the first stanza. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high over vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils. Beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. In the first stanza, the poet recalls how once when he was wandering as freely as a cloud over valleys and hills, he suddenly comes across a large number of golden daffodils. The daffodils had grown under the trees near the lake, and a cool breeze was blowing. So the beautiful flowers tossed their head in the breeze as if they were dancing. The beautiful scene thus captivated the poet. And this gave a rise to numerous emotions which he enjoyed. The host of daffodils were welcoming the poet as being the guest. Continuous as stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in sprightly high. Now in this stanza, the poet recalls that the daffodils which he saw were numerous as shining stars in the Milky Way in the sky. The simile underlines the large number and the beauty of the flowers. The daffodils growing beside the lake seemed to form an endless line. They tossed their heads to and fro in the breeze as if they were engaged in a lively dance. The daffodils are personified as human beings, dancing and tossing their heads. Earlier, they have been described as a crowd and a host. This personification continues throughout to underline an inherent unity between man and nature. The poet also feels that daffodils represent as numerous as the stars that shine and twinkle in the Milky Way. There's a long line which is spread along the bank of the lake, and it reminds him of the beauty of the Creator. With this, we come to the end of this session. We'll continue with the next two stanzas in the next session. Thank you.